Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. Power isn't about who speaks the loudest, it's about who can stay silent and still make the room tremble. Psychologists have found that humans are naturally wired to crave what they can't fully control, and nowhere is this more evident than in the secret obsession alpha women have with Sigma men. Alpha females, the women who conquer boardrooms, silence critics and walk into a room like they own the floor, are not impressed by the typical alpha male. Why? Because he's just a mirror of themselves, loud, competitive, predictable. But the Sigma male, he's the one puzzle they can't solve, the one fire they can't put out, and the one man who doesn't melt when exposed to their heat. It's almost funny when you think about it. The woman who can bend empires with her will suddenly find herself stalking the mind of a man who doesn't even care if she's watching. That paradox is exactly why alpha females secretly find themselves obsessed with Sigmas. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on the truth no one talks about. Number 1, he doesn't demand submission, he invites surrender. A Sigma man doesn't need to wrestle for control because control is never his goal in the first place. Alpha men, by nature, want to establish dominance. They push, they challenge, they set terms, and in return they expect submission. For an alpha female, this becomes a constant tug of war, a battle of wills that drains more than it fulfills. She respects strength, but she despises the feeling of being forced to bend. With a Sigma male, the dynamic is completely different. He never asks her to shrink, never pressures her to play small, and never demands that she put down her crown just to make him feel bigger. What makes him so disarming is that he doesn't try to dominate her at all. His strength is quiet, almost unshakable, and it doesn't rely on putting her in her place. Instead, it creates a sense of calm around him. He moves through life with such certainty and steadiness that she naturally feels secure in his presence. And security, not force, is what makes even the strongest women lower their guard. That's why with Sigma men, surrender isn't about losing, it's about finally exhaling. Alpha females who spend their lives fighting to be taken seriously rarely meet men who can make them feel safe enough to soften without stripping away their power. But a Sigma does exactly that. He doesn't need to cage her to feel strong. He doesn't need to win battles with her to feel like a man. By simply standing firm in who he is, he creates space where she can stop fighting and just be. That's the hidden reason women, especially alpha women, surrender to Sigmas. Not because they're forced into it, but because they want to. It feels like freedom wrapped in connection, not like a prison built out of dominance. With alphas, surrender is a compromise. With Sigmas, surrender feels like trust. And when a woman realizes she can lay down her armor without losing herself, that's when she willingly gives him something no demand or power play could ever win: her genuine, unguarded devotion. Number 2, he's the one man she can't predict. Alpha females live in a world where predictability is power. They've trained themselves to read people like open books, every move, every motive, every weakness. Most men, especially alpha men, are easy for them to figure out. They know that if she pushes, he pushes back. If she challenges him, he rises to it. If she competes, he locks horns. It's a simple pattern, and because it's simple, it's boring. There's no thrill in dealing with someone you can map out after just a few interactions. That's why the Sigma male is such a different storm in her life. A Sigma is unreadable. His behavior doesn't orbit around her, or around anyone else for that matter. He moves according to his own private code, one that's not written in the language of power struggles or social games. He's not driven by the usual triggers: status, dominance, recognition, so her tried and true methods of control fall flat. When she tries to provoke, he doesn't bite. When she tests him, he doesn't break. When she withdraws to see if he'll chase, he doesn't even move. That refusal to play her game leaves her hanging in suspense. And for a woman who's used to control, suspense is intoxicating. The unpredictability of a Sigma man forces her into a state she rarely experiences: uncertainty. Uncertainty is the crack in her armor, the space where obsession grows. She starts asking herself questions she never asked about anyone else. What's he thinking? Why didn't he react? What's guiding his choices? And the more she doesn't know, the more she needs to know. He becomes an unsolvable equation that refuses to balance, and her mind keeps coming back to it day after day. The irony is that Sigma males aren't unpredictable because they're trying to be mysterious. They simply don't operate within her frame of reference. They answer to themselves, not the crowd. That self-governing mindset makes them look random from the outside, when in truth they're just consistent to their own rules. But to her it's maddening. The alpha male is a chess game she can win. The sigma male is a game where she can't even see the board, and that's why she obsesses. Not because he tries to outsmart her, but because he refuses to be defined by her. He's the one man who can't be pinned down, and for a woman who prides herself on control, that makes him the most irresistible mystery of all. Number 3. He's the only man she can't intimidate. Alpha females are used to walking into a room and watching men shrink. Their presence alone is enough to make most men stumble over their words, second-guess themselves, or scramble to prove their worth. Even alpha men who pride themselves on dominance often get caught in the trap of posturing when faced with a powerful alpha woman. They either try to outshine her, clash with her, or subtly undermine her, because deep down her strength rattles them. But sigma males? They're a different breed entirely. A sigma man isn't wired to be impressed or threatened by external displays of power. He doesn't measure himself against others, which means her confidence, her dominance, and even her authority don't shake him. She can throw her sharpest looks, use her sharpest tone, or project all the commanding energy in the world, and he'll still meet her with the same calm, steady presence he shows everyone. He doesn't resist her, but he doesn't bow to her either. He simply stands as himself, untouched by her attempts to intimidate. And that's what unsettles her most. For a woman who's built an entire identity on being formidable, it's unnerving to face a man who can't be moved. Intimidation is one of her strongest tools. It's how she weeds out the weak, asserts dominance, and ensures her place at the top. But when that tool bounces off a sigma like rain on stone, she's left without leverage. She can't provoke him, she can't control him, and she can't throw him off balance. He becomes the first man she can't dominate through sheer presence alone. What makes this even more powerful is that sigmas don't resist intimidation as a strategy. They're simply unaffected by it. He doesn't see her strength as a challenge to conquer or a threat to his identity. He accepts it as part of who she is and keeps moving on his own wavelength. That quiet indifference strips her of the reaction she subconsciously expects, and paradoxically it makes him even more magnetic. For the alpha female, this is both frustrating and addictive. She's not used to being met with calm instead of competition. The more he refuses to be shaken, the more she finds herself drawn to him. Not because she wants to overpower him, but because his composure reminds her of something rare, a man who doesn't just withstand her fire, but remains completely unchanged by it. That kind of steadiness is something even her power can't manufacture, and that's exactly why she can't stay away. Number 4, he makes her feel feminine. With alpha men, an alpha woman is constantly dragged into an exhausting game of one-upmanship. Every conversation becomes a debate, every decision becomes a tug-of-war, and every success turns into a competition for who shines brighter. It's a never-ending battle of egos where she has to prove over and over again that she deserves her seat at the table. And while she's fully capable of holding her ground, the cost is high. She can never truly relax. Around an alpha man, she's forced to keep her armor on at all times, but with a sigma male, the energy shifts completely. He doesn't challenge her femininity by forcing her into submission, and he doesn't compete with her power just to reassure himself. Instead, he creates an environment where she doesn't need to fight for space. He's not interested in overpowering her, and he doesn't measure his masculinity by how much he can dominate her. That difference alone changes everything. For the first time, she can step into her feminine side without worrying that it will be used against her. What's so paradoxical is that the Sigma's strength actually amplifies her womanhood. His calm, grounded presence doesn't diminish her. It allows her to unfold in ways she can't with others. She doesn't feel the need to harden her edges or keep proving her worth. Instead, she can lean into her softer qualities, her warmth, her intuition, her creativity, without ever feeling like she's being diminished. The Sigma man never confuses softness with weakness, and because of that, she can embrace sides of herself that even she sometimes hides. This is why alpha women secretly crave Sigma men. They get to keep their power without sacrificing their femininity. Around him, she doesn't feel like a warrior locked in battle, but like a woman who can finally exhale. That balance is rare. He gives her the freedom to be powerful without pressure, and the safety to be vulnerable without fear. It's not submission he draws out of her, it's surrender in the most beautiful sense, a surrender that feels like trust, not defeat. And that's the kind of space where her femininity doesn't just survive, it flourishes. Number 5. He's a mirror she can't manipulate. Alpha females are used to men reacting to their power. With most alphas, she knows exactly which strings to pull, flaunt her status, sharpen her tone, assert her presence, and he'll either rise up to compete or fold under the weight of her dominance. It's predictable. She has mastered the art of bending powerful men to her will by using the very tools they respect: status, dominance, control. But when she meets a Sigma, all of those weapons lose their edge. A Sigma male doesn't step onto that battlefield at all. He doesn't measure worth through titles, attention, or social positioning. He isn't dazzled by her accomplishments, nor is he threatened by them. He isn't swayed by her charm when it's used as a power play, and he isn't moved when she tries to rattle him with her presence. Instead, he simply reflects her energy back to her with a calm, unbothered steadiness. In that moment, he becomes a mirror she can't bend, a reflection she can't distort, and that realization unsettles her more than anything else. For a woman who thrives on control, encountering someone immune to it is both frustrating and electrifying. She's used to manipulating environments, shaping outcomes, and bending people into alignment with her will. But with a Sigma, the harder she pushes, the more she discovers there's nothing to grip. He doesn't resist her, but he doesn't yield either. He just exists outside the reach of her influence, standing firm in who he is. And that rare immovability forces her to confront something she rarely feels: vulnerability. Yet here's the twist. She finds that vulnerability strangely addictive. It excites her to meet someone she can't outmaneuver, someone who makes her drop her usual strategies and face him as a woman, not as a commander. In him, she finds the one person who can't be manipulated into orbiting her world, and that refusal to bend becomes the very thing that draws her closer. The Sigma man doesn't play games because he doesn't need to. He holds up an unshakable mirror, showing her that power loses its meaning when it meets someone who isn't chasing it. And for the alpha female, that's not just humbling, it's irresistible. Number 6. His silence speaks louder than her authority. An alpha female is accustomed to winning attention through force. Her voice carries authority, her presence demands recognition, and her energy naturally pulls eyes toward her. She's mastered the art of owning a room through charisma, command, and presence. It's her battlefield, and on it she rarely loses. But then comes the Sigma male, who steps into the same room and doesn't need to lift a finger, raise his voice, or assert himself. His silence alone shifts the atmosphere, and it unsettles her more than any loud alpha man ever could. The Sigma's strength lies in the fact that he doesn't try. While everyone else competes to be seen and heard, he doesn't chase attention, it comes to him. His silence isn't empty. It's loaded with self-possession and a gravity that people feel without knowing why. He doesn't need the spotlight, yet somehow it tilts in his direction. And for a woman who is used to equating power with noise, this quiet dominance feels almost unfair. What unsettles her most is that his silence is not passivity, it's presence. He can stand at the edge of a room and command more respect than men who speak endlessly to prove their worth. That kind of quiet power haunts her because it's a reminder that authority doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and still shakes the ground. She's spent years building influence through visibility, yet here's a man whose very calmness outshines deliberate performance. The more time she spends around him, the more that silence gets under her skin. It strips away her usual tools. She can't out-talk it, outshine it, or drown it out. Instead, it forces her to feel it. And that feeling lingers long after he's gone. His calm presence echoes in her mind like an unanswered question, reminding her that true authority doesn't always need to announce itself. That's why his silence unnerves her and fascinates her in equal measure. It's not the silence of absence, but the silence of power contained, of strength restrained, of a man so secure he doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. And for an alpha female who has conquered countless loud men, that kind of quiet haunts her more than any battle for dominance ever could. Number 7. He's a rebellion against her entire social hierarchy. Alpha females thrive in hierarchies. They've mastered them, climbed them, and in many cases built empires within them. For them, life is a structured game where power is measured in recognition, position, and dominance. They understand the rules, they play them well, and they rarely lose. But then comes the Sigma male, the man who refuses to even sit at the table. He doesn't reject her hierarchy out of weakness or fear. He rejects it because he doesn't need it. His power is self-sustaining, and that alone makes him a rebellion against everything she stands on. In her world, dominance is currency. You fight for titles, command loyalty, and guard your territory. Every interaction has an element of strategy. Who's above, who's below, who's competing. But Sigmas don't play that economy. They don't buy into the idea that worth is dictated by social rank, attention, or approval. A Sigma man doesn't need a following to validate him, a crown to justify him, or applause to sustain him. He exists outside the ladder altogether. And that kind of freedom terrifies and fascinates her at the same time. For an alpha female, this hits deep. She has fought tooth and nail for her power, for her place in the hierarchy, for her right to be seen as dominant in a male-driven world. Yet here stands a man who radiates more authority than most leaders without lifting a finger, without climbing, without fighting for it. It forces her to face a brutal truth. The system she mastered isn't the only way to win. And in that realization, envy quietly creeps in. What makes it worse is that his rejection of hierarchy doesn't make him invisible. Quite the opposite, it makes him unforgettable. His refusal to play the game becomes its own form of power. While alphas are constantly jockeying for position, the Sigma man walks away from the arena and somehow ends up being the one everyone still talks about. That paradox disrupts the very foundation of her world, and she can't help but feel both admiration and obsession toward it. He is proof that dominance isn't always loud, competitive, or structured. It can be silent, solitary, and untethered. And for an alpha female who has given everything to conquer her hierarchy, the Sigma represents a haunting reminder. Maybe true power doesn't come from the system at all, but from the freedom to never need it. Number 8, he doesn't need to dominate her to be her equal. Alpha females are used to relationships feeling like battlegrounds. With alpha men, everything turns into a subtle or not so subtle contest. Who leads the conversation? Who makes the final decision? Who has the upper hand in influence, status, or control? It becomes an endless cycle of sparring where even love is laced with competition. She doesn't necessarily mind the fight. After all, she's built for it. But deep down, she knows it strips away the softness, the ease, the connection she quietly craves. With a Sigma male, that battlefield disappears completely. A Sigma doesn't need to win over her or win against her to feel like a man. His sense of worth doesn't depend on proving dominance in every interaction. He doesn't measure his masculinity against her achievements, her power, or her presence. Instead, he simply exists on equal ground, steady, unbothered, and complete in himself. That absence of competition creates something rare: balance. She doesn't have to diminish herself to make space for him, and he doesn't have to inflate himself to keep up with her. This balance is magnetic because it gives her something she doesn't often experience: the freedom to just be. She doesn't have to armor up, doesn't have to defend her strength, and doesn't have to engage in constant duels of ego. Around him, her power is acknowledged but not threatened. Her presence is respected but not challenged. He doesn't want her throne, and he doesn't want her crown. He just stands beside her as an equal, and that's far more powerful than any man trying to wrestle her into submission. What makes it so irresistible is that equality with a Sigma never feels like compromise. With alpha men, equality usually means a stalemate, both sides holding their ground until exhaustion sets in. With Sigmas, equality feels natural, effortless, and almost disarming. He doesn't seek dominance, yet somehow his independence and inner strength place him right at her level without conflict. For an alpha female, this is intoxicating. She finally finds a man who matches her without trying to outmatch her, who shares the stage without demanding the spotlight, and who holds his ground without turning it into a war. It's not submission, it's not competition, it's balance. And in her world, balance is the rarest, most magnetic thing of all. Number 9, he's not afraid of losing her, which forces her to chase. Alpha females are used to being treated like prized possessions. Alpha men, in particular, clutch onto them as if they're trophies, constantly guarding, competing, and proving to the world that they've secured someone powerful at their side. On the surface, it looks flattering, but underneath, it's suffocating. That constant guarding isn't about love, it's about fear. Fear of losing status, fear of losing control, fear of losing her to someone stronger. And an alpha woman can smell fear from a mile away. A Sigma male operates on the opposite end of the spectrum. He isn't afraid of losing her because his identity isn't tied to her presence. He doesn't see her as a status symbol or a prize to be displayed. He sees her as a person, not a possession. And because his sense of worth comes from within, he's not threatened by the possibility of her walking away. That quiet readiness to let go at any moment flips the entire dynamic on its head. For an alpha female, this is maddening and magnetic at the same time. She's used to men clinging to her, adjusting themselves to keep her happy, fighting to hold on. But when she encounters a Sigma, he doesn't cling. He calmly stands in his independence, knowing he'll be fine with or without her. That kind of detachment forces her to chase because suddenly she's not the one holding all the cards. He becomes the one man she can't easily secure, and that rarity makes him unforgettable. The paradox here is brutal. The less afraid he is of losing her, the harder it becomes for her to imagine losing him. His refusal to play the game of desperate attachment exposes how replaceable most other men really are, and how irreplaceable he is. While alpha men turn her into an emblem of their dominance, the Sigma treats her as free to stay or go. That freedom feels dangerous, but it also feels deeply real, and that's why she chases. Not because he asked her to, not because he manipulated her into it, but because his willingness to walk away makes him the one man she can't afford to let slip. His power isn't in holding on to her, it's in proving that he doesn't need to. And for an alpha female, that changes everything. Number 10. He's comfortable in shadows while she fights for spotlight. For the alpha female, life is often a constant climb toward recognition. She battles to be seen, to be heard, to be respected in rooms that weren't built for her. Every move she makes, every victory she claims carries the weight of proving herself, not just to others, but sometimes to herself as well. The spotlight isn't just a luxury for her. It's a battlefield she's conquered over and over again. Yet when she meets a Sigma male, all of that effort is thrown into sharp contrast. The Sigma doesn't chase acknowledgement. He doesn't need applause, validation, or a pedestal to confirm his worth. He thrives in the shadows, comfortable existing outside of society's gaze. While others are busy competing for recognition, he's building his life quietly, on his own terms, untouched by the noise of comparison. That kind of self-assurance is rare, and it rattles her more than she'd like to admit. What unsettles her is not that he avoids the spotlight, it's that he doesn't need it. For her, recognition has been proof of survival, proof of power, proof that she belongs. But for him, recognition is irrelevant. His confidence comes from within, rooted so deeply that no title, applause, or crown could add to it. That effortless independence forces her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Maybe her climb, as impressive as it is, has been fueled not only by ambition, but also by a quiet hunger to be validated. The Sigma male becomes a living contradiction in her world. He possesses the kind of authority and presence that most leaders dream of, yet he doesn't flaunt it. He holds influence without demanding attention, and his lack of hunger for acknowledgement makes him stand taller than men who spend their lives chasing it. That contrast exposes the cracks in her own armor, the hollowness in parts of her climb, and the exhausting need to constantly prove herself. And instead of resenting him for it, she finds herself drawn to it. His comfort in the shadows is the kind of strength she secretly longs for, but rarely allows herself to embrace. He reminds her that power doesn't always need to be displayed. It can exist quietly, securely, unshakably. And that realization makes him not only fascinating, but dangerously magnetic. Number 11, he values freedom over power, and that redefines attraction. For an alpha female, power is the language of attraction. She's used to men circling her throne, trying to prove themselves worthy of standing beside her, or worse, trying to snatch the crown for themselves. Alpha men especially fall into this trap, seeing her not as a partner but as a rival or as a prize that validates their own dominance. That dynamic leaves her constantly entangled in battles of ego, where the relationship becomes less about connection and more about who holds the upper hand. A Sigma male, however, dismantles this entire framework. He doesn't care about her throne, her crown, or her kingdom. Power in the traditional sense, status, dominance, control, doesn't move him. What he values above all is freedom, the ability to think, act, and live without chains, whether they're social, emotional, or relational. That fundamental difference flips her entire conditioning on its head. For the first time, she meets a man who isn't trying to own her space or prove himself through her. He's not drawn to her power because he already possesses the one thing more valuable than power: independence. This indifference is exactly what makes him magnetic. In a world where most men are either intimidated by her authority or obsessed with challenging it, his refusal to even participate is shocking. She can't lure him with status, she can't bait him with competition, she can't manipulate him with the usual carrots of recognition or position. He stands outside all of it, unbothered, untouched. And that makes him dangerous in a way she never saw coming. What unnerves her most is how his freedom redefines attraction itself. Around alpha men, attraction is a dance of dominance: who bends, who leads, who wins. With a sigma, attraction is about choice. He chooses to be there, not because he needs her throne, but because he wants her presence. That voluntary connection, free from chains of power, carries more weight than any conquest ever could. For an alpha female, this changes everything. She realizes that a man who values freedom over power can't be bought, trapped, or tamed. And paradoxically, that makes her want him even more. Because deep down, she knows the truth. Crowns can be taken, thrones can be lost, but a man who guards his freedom, he's untouchable, and irresistibly so. Number 12, he exposes how dependent alphas really are. Alpha men wear strength like a badge, but beneath that exterior lies a hidden dependency most people overlook. Their entire identity is tied to being seen, recognized, and followed. They thrive on validation, on competition, on the hierarchy that keeps them at the top. Without the audience, without the hierarchy, their dominance crumbles because it doesn't exist in isolation. And an alpha female, sharp as she is, notices this truth more than anyone. She sees the cracks in their armor. She sees how alpha men constantly seek reassurance from their position, how they measure their worth by how many people listen to them, respect them, or fear them. Their power isn't self-contained, it's borrowed from the crowd. That dependency cheapens it, and while she may respect their drive, she secretly knows it's fragile. Then she meets the Sigma male. He's the opposite of everything she's used to. He doesn't need followers, he doesn't need applause, and he doesn't need a hierarchy to validate who he is. His authority doesn't come from being on top of a pyramid. It comes from within, untouched by outside recognition. He doesn't lose strength when he's alone. In fact, solitude seems to make him stronger, and that's when it hits her. This is what true independence looks like. The Sigma exposes the uncomfortable truth that alpha men are addicted to the very systems they claim to dominate. Without them, they're lost. The Sigma, on the other hand, would be the same man with or without the world's approval. He doesn't need to lead to have power. He doesn't need an audience to have value. And he doesn't need external validation to know who he is. That self-sufficiency is something even alpha women find hard to claim, and it's exactly why she respects it so deeply. What makes it even more compelling is how effortlessly he does it. He's not rejecting validation to make a statement, he genuinely doesn't require it. And that authenticity is magnetic. For the alpha female, it's both unsettling and inspiring to witness. The Sigma becomes living proof that power dependent on others isn't power at all, it's just a performance. And she can't help but admire, even obsess over, the man who doesn't need the stage, yet still outshines everyone on it. In the end, what makes alpha females secretly obsessed with Sigma males isn't charm or dominance or some scripted performance of strength. It's the fact that he exists completely outside the game she's mastered. She can command alphas, outwit rivals, and bend entire rooms to her will. But the Sigma refuses to bend, refuses to battle, refuses to be owned. His power is not in the crown, the crowd, or the competition. It's in his freedom. He is the one man she cannot predict, cannot intimidate, and cannot manipulate. The harder she tries, the more she realizes his strength isn't tied to her approval or anyone else's. It's rooted in himself. And that kind of independence exposes the truth she rarely admits, even to herself. Much of the world's power is fragile because it depends on being seen. His, however, is untouchable because it doesn't. To her, that's maddening. To her, that's magnetic. And that's why the Sigma becomes not just attractive, but unforgettable. He redefines what it means to be equal, what it means to connect, and what it means to surrender, not through force, but through presence. And for a woman who can conquer almost everything, he remains the one man she doesn't want to conquer at all. So while alpha men compete for her crown, the Sigma stands apart, unmoved, uninterested, and in that quiet rebellion he becomes the only man she secretly obsesses over. If this breakdown opened your eyes to truths no one else dares to say, then don't just sit on it, own it. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that cuts deeper than clichés. Smash the like if you felt the raw honesty here, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective might just flip the conversation. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Truth spreads when we spread it.